Just a few bits of housekeeping before we get started. I'm going to audio describe myself. So I'm a white man in my 40s. I've got long, kind of shoulder length, curly hair and a long beard down to my belly. I'm wearing blue jeans, blue t-shirt and blue shoes, I realise. So I'm all blue today, so there we go. A couple of bits of information. Loos are just out front, out that way if you're in the room, along with accessible loo, and the fire exit is also that way. We're not expecting any fire drills. Anybody online, please do feel free to add comments and questions in the chat, and we will relay them into the room as and when they come up. The format of the evening, we've got 3 presentations, so we're going to have 2 presentations, then we'll do a short break and followed by the 3rd presentation. In the gaps, there is an opportunity for you to go and have a go on some of the instruments and try out various things, so please do. And also grab any of the team if you've got any questions about anything, you know, come and talk to us, and I'm very happy to meet new people. So first up this evening, we have a presentation by Todd Lacks, who is a mixed media artist, music technologist and sound designer from South Portland in Maine. He's going to be joining us remotely, talking about his new accessible synth called Double Wide that he's been working on. He's learned to program Max MSP in order to... Lee Todd. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Lee Todd. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Oh, very well, thanks. Yes, so you're on the screen, and I think we can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Brilliant. Okay, so I think everything's set up. So, Lee Todd, do take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, my name is Todd Lacks, and I am a music technologist. My pronouns are he and him, and I am wearing round frame glasses with a hearing aid in my right ear. I'm delighted to speak to you today about a software synthesizer that I've been developing for the past 3 years, which I have named Double Wide. Double Wide is a synthesizer that's built in Max MSP, which is a programming language that I was introduced to by a colleague of mine. My colleague referred to this Max MSP as being a language that was ideally suited for computer music and multimedia applications. Now, my background has always involved music in some form or another, but I have relatively little experience in computer programming. All my attempts at computer programming have been mostly unsuccessful, and I had always presumed that I lacked the aptitude for computer programming. However, I decided to give it a try with Max MSP, and I was surprised to discover that Max is very intuitive as computer languages go. So by early 2022, I had been working as a music therapist for children and adults with disabilities for about 10 years. And then the COVID pandemic emerged, and like many others, I lost my position with the agency, and I was compelled to figure out how I could be productive while working from home. So I started thinking more about my computer programming experience. And while I've always had a fascination for software hardware that produces and manipulates sound, I've often thought that it would be wonderful if I was capable of creating my own instruments with which I could produce entirely new music. So I talked to this colleague of mine, to whom I referred earlier, and he mentioned Max MSP, or Max for short. Max is a visual programming environment that involves the connection of objects with virtual patch cords. If we could please show figure 1 so that the audience could see what the objects in MAX actually look like. So this image is a portion of the section that handles the frequency modulation process for MAX, or for double wide, I should say. Double wide is a synthesizer that uses 2 different types of synthesis engine. There is additive synthesis, and then there is FM synthesis. So if you look at this figure, you can see labeled boxes. These boxes are referred to as objects, and they are containers for bits of JavaScript code. When you connect the boxes to one another, you can create the tasks. So if you look at the image, you can see the virtual patch cables that are connecting the objects in different ways. And that's what makes MAX a visual programming environment. Now, one of the reasons I chose to work with MAX is because I contend with significant vision and hearing losses, and thus I need a programming environment that allows me to view the different bits of code without having to exert an unreasonable amount of effort. To my eyes, the programming environment in MAX looks very much like word magnets stuck to a blackboard. And for me, that seems highly viewable. So I was able to learn MAX in about a month, which is remarkable in and of itself, because once again, I've never regarded myself as being somebody who was a natural when it came to computer coding. I used MAX, and from the very beginning, I tried to be mindful about how I position and arrange the various objects so that related sets of objects had similar patterns. I did this so that when I had to refer back to the file that contained these objects, I was able to recognize what part of the synthesizer I was dealing with without having, even on those days when my vision didn't allow me to read the labels themselves. And I didn't necessarily know why I was being so obsessive when I started 3 years ago. But as my vision continued to wane, I became very grateful for having been so obsessive about the way I arranged things within my program in an organized, symmetrical way. However, even though MAX is quite viewable as computer programming environments go, I soon realized that I was going to need to figure out a way to access the parameters in double wide without having to constantly refer to the display of my computer. And I realized that the same would be true for other users who contend with low vision. So early on, I began assigning the various double wide parameters to knobs and buttons on hardware devices with which I can control the parameters without having to click and drag on specific objects in order to adjust their settings. One of the devices that I use is a Faderfox PC4, which is basically a black box of knobs. There are 24 knobs on the front panel, and the device has the capacity to store the settings for 16 groups of 24 knobs. And so, as you can imagine, I'm able to control quite a few parameters with this one device. I also have a button panel, which is the Novation Launchpad Mini Mark III. It is a panel of 64 buttons, and the user can activate whichever buttons they wish, and they can choose specific colors for those active buttons. I've modified this launch panel by affixing translucent tactile markers to the active buttons so that I can find the buttons by touch on those days when my vision doesn't allow me to discern the colors. So what I am hoping to accomplish with the synthesizer is to continue to make it more accessible for users with low vision. I am now going to present a video which explains the architecture of double wide. Before doing so, I'm going to show one more image. We could show the image for figure number 2. If you look at this image, you can see that there are quite a few more objects. This is a much more sophisticated component. It is the envelope for my cutoff transmitter. And so when you have a group of the name for a file that contains a group of objects in Max is known as a patcher. So if you hear me use the term patcher, I'm referring to a file that may constitute a specific application. So now I would like to present a video which provides you with a brief overview of double wide and goes into further detail regarding the devices with which I use to control it.
Hello, my name is Todd Lacks, and today I will be demonstrating a MkII-based synthesizer that I've been developing for the past 3 years, which I have named Double Wide. Double Wide is somewhat similar to other software synthesizers in terms of its architecture. It has 4 oscillators. It uses a combination of additive synthesis and FM synthesis in order to produce sounds. It has dedicated envelopes for amplitude, modulation index, cutoff frequency, and pitch, as well as a low-pass filter stage for each of the oscillators. It also has a number of different modulation possibilities, which include pulse width, vibrato, tremolo, and filter modulation. And I have been developing this synthesizer with the intention of optimizing it for users with low vision. I myself contend with significant vision and hearing deficits, and so as a matter of necessity, I've had to develop double wide in a way that would enable me to access its parameters without having to spend an inordinate amount of time staring at the display of my computer, searching for specific objects in Max that I needed to locate in order to change their settings. So I'll just give you an example of what double wide sounds like from a qualitative standpoint. That's a preset that I call solo violin, and it's a sound that uses two oscillators. One of the oscillators actually features a waveform that I drew myself and then uploaded to the synthesizer. And I find that the ability to draw waveforms allows for a lot of different interesting possibilities, in addition to being able to use the waveforms for audio sources. I can also use them as sub-audio signals for the modulation settings, and I can also use the drawn waveforms as carrier signals for my FM processed sounds. I am interested in using hardware devices such as the Faderfox PC4, which is essentially a box of knobs, 24 knobs, and these knobs are assigned to parameters that have 2 or more values. Parameters that can be scaled, such as the cutoff frequency or the attack level for any one of the oscillators. And then I also use this panel of buttons. This is a Novation Launchpad Mini Mark III. It's a panel with 64 illuminated buttons. And in addition to being mindful of how viewable the color choices are, I've also adapted this box by affixing translucent tactile markers to the buttons that are currently activated so that I'm actually able to locate them without having to see the colors of the buttons themselves. During the remainder of this presentation, I'll be discussing other aspects of double wide, but I hope that this video has provided you with an introduction to my synthesizer, and I'm very excited to connect with people who might be interested in using it for their own creative purposes. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Hello again. So, as you saw in the video, there are other components of the synthesizer that I would like to discuss at this time, which are particularly exciting to me. The first component is something that I refer to as a CC mapper, which basically allows me to reassign any parameter of double wide to any one of 128 MIDI controller change messages. If we could show figure number 3, that provides an illustration of the mapper. So this rather extensive max patcher contains all of the components for the mapper. Basically, I can set any preset with the menu on the far left, and then with the menu in the middle, I can select any parameter from a list of 218. And then with the number boxes, I'm able to specify which controller change that particular parameter should be reassigned to. This will allow a user to assign parameters to controller change messages that are best suited for the software and hardware that they happen to be using. And thus they were not going to be constrained to working with the default settings. The other component that I'd like to mention to you is a component that allows users to create custom waveforms for each oscillator by drawing into specific objects. If we could please show figure number 4. So in this figure, you see those large rectangular fields, and these fields are meant for drawing wave shapes by using a mouse or a stylus, and then the wave shapes are rendered to audio so that you can play them just like any other waveform with whatever oscillator you happen to be using. Double wide has 4. Now, in the interest of making this component more intuitive and accessible, I had thought that it would be wonderful if I could figure out a way for people to use their portable touchscreen devices as a means for drawing the waves so that they could then be wirelessly uploaded to whatever device they happen to be using to run double wide. For the past several months, I have been working in collaboration with Tim Yates to create an application that performs this task. Tim has kindly offered to revise an application that he began working on some time ago, which is currently known as Wave Drawer. With this application, we're hoping that we can create a component that will allow anyone who has a phone or a tablet to open the rectangular fields on their screen and draw into those fields so that they don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time locating these rectangular boxes within a very large patcher on their computer display. I'm very excited to continue this collaboration with Tim, and I look forward to seeing whether or not we can make the idea work in tandem with double wide. Looking into the future, I hope to assemble a team of beta testers who can help me determine whether or not double wide's accessibility is significantly broad for any number of users with low vision. I would be interested in finding out what others might be capable of creating with double wide. And I look forward to future developments. If there is anyone who would like to communicate with me, I have a Bandcamp site which includes an album that has 17 tracks, each of which feature a different sound that I have created using double wide. At this time, I'd like to open the discussion to any questions that you might have. So I would like to thank you very much for joining me this evening. And please let me know if there's anything I can answer for you.
Amazing. Thanks, Lee Todd. I have a round of applause for Lee Todd. Thank you. Fabulous.
Yeah,
Does anybody have any questions in the room for Lee Todd?
We're all muted.
Can you hear
I
me?
don't understand. We're all muted.
Can you hear me?
Honey, they're gone.
Okay.
No, we're still here. Can you hear me? Hello, hello?
Yeah, it's like suddenly, yep.
Ah, of course. Streaming. Always technical issues. I think that have they gone? Maybe, but it seems like they may have. Oh no, here we go. Lee Todd, can you hear me?
Can't hear anybody.
Did we have
Hang on.
Can you hear me? Hello,
Yes.
hello? Oh, you can hear me?
Yes.
Ah, marvelous. Okay, great. Are there any? We're just looking questions. Any questions in the room at the moment? I mean, I was just wondering. I think it's super interesting that you learned this programming language just because you wanted to build your own synth. What were the biggest challenges that you found in kind of using Max as a way of building a synthesizer?
I think that's an interesting question because initially, when I began working with the program just 3.5 years ago, my vision was quite a bit better than it is now. And so my initial impetus for choosing Max had a lot to do with its viewability. Again, my only experience with computer programming involved scripting languages. I had never used a visual programming environment before, and I have to confess that is a much easier way for me to approach programming. And I can't speak for anyone other than myself. I know everyone with low vision has a different experience, but I definitely spent a lot of time viewing videos that described how to create different processes. And I also spent a lot of time reading documentation online through the Cycling 74 website. Cycling 74 is the company that created Max. And Max also has, or Cycling 74 also has a tremendous user forum where people can ask questions and get answers. And so I was definitely able to view those videos and read that documentation back in 2022. And so I was motivated to learn, and I was surprised by how quickly I learned.
Oh, amazing. And have you found that the software has then continued to be accessible to you over time? Has it kind of grown with you?
I would say yes. It's become more difficult. It's become harder to read the labels on the objects. It's become harder to see how different objects are connected with the virtual patch boards, just because my vision has deteriorated to a significant extent over the past 3 years. But I still regard Max as being a language that's friendly to low vision users. And once again, I have to emphasize the point that I made earlier. As I've continued to develop Max, I've been mindful of the way in which I've arranged the various objects so that when I refer to different patchers and sub-patchers, I look for patterns, almost like constellations of objects. If I'll have a bunch of objects that perform a similar function, I'll arrange them in an organized, symmetrical way so that I see those patterns, even if I can't discern a label on any specific object. I can still see where I'm at within the synthesizer. One of the things that I built into double wadded are buttons that enable me to open and close 12 of the sub-patchers by pressing specific buttons. To be specific, the buttons on the top row, all 8 of these buttons, if you can see them, will open or close a different subpatcher within W1. So this enables me to navigate the SIM without having to locate specific boxes on specific screens, which now requires a lot more time and a lot more effort than I can afford to expend.
Okay, that's really interesting. It's really interesting that you've integrated the kind of workflow of the programming language along with the way that you're controlling the synthesizer. I think that's a really interesting way of approaching things.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions in the room? Anyone? No. Okay, so I think we're out of time anyway. Lee Todd, thank you so much, everybody. Please give Lee Todd another round of applause. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll share your contact details for your Bandcamp with everybody so that they can get in touch with you. So I know you're looking for testers, so if anybody's up for that, then please do.
I would appreciate that.
Because I think it's really exciting and really interesting project. Thanks, Lee Todd. Thanks for joining us all the way from the US.
And thanks to the audience for joining me this evening.
Great. One more round of applause. Thank you. Great. Fabulous. So next up we have Rhiannon Armstrong, who is going to be sharing a methodology and sounds from her project, The White Noise Factory. This is a participatory presentation, so don't be afraid to come up and have a go. Rhiannon will let you know when it's the right moment, so I think Rhiannon's going to show a video first and things, but then she will guide you through the process. But please do come and have a go and enjoy.
I'm just going to play this video for about 6 minutes, 2 parts of a longer video, and then we'll do some doing or some being. I think the only thing I'll say right now, by way of an introduction, is that I'm aware I'm in this accessible technology zone, and perhaps I want to say that I believe that the accessible technology that I'm here to present about is a mindset. Cool.
My name is Rhiannon Armstrong. I describe myself as a performance artist. My work has taken place in lots of different contexts and in different ways. So I've made works that are training sessions on how to rest in public space, digital art interventions online and in smartphone. I've done participatory projects where people write poems made from words found in the bin. Sometimes I describe that the work that I make, I use the medium of empathy. And I would add to that now like empathy and relationships. So the work is often primarily a relationship between me and audiences or participants or people engaging with the work and each other and themselves. And it's a relational encounter that produces something for others to experience. The White Noise Factory has come from a desire to make something that privileges sensory meaning making over intellectual meaning making, and that does that in the making process as well as the experiencing process. There's a listening environment that is the White Noise Factory, and that is being worked out to be highly responsive. And then the White Noise Factory is also a series of collaborations, of music and sound making collaborations that have privileged the sensory over the intellectual. That has involved different things. So that's involved me exploring materials as a way of making sound. And it's also involved me collaborating with young people for whom language is not a primary means of communication, and doing sound and music collaboration in non-linguistic sensory sessions together. I think that music and sound that has been made in that mode should be being shared widely. It should be being shared widely in a way that sort of brings people into that same way of being. My aim for the piece is that the listening environment is completely responsive to the audience that are there, that things change around you in a way that supports your listening experience, but also that the sounds that are being played in the space might also change depending on your actions or how you're being in the space. I've been working with a DJ called Sayang. I've shared the sounds made in these collaborative sessions. The Sayang as a DJ is highly responsive to what's happening in the room. And although they might be using the same bank of sounds from one performance to the next, what they do with those sounds will be completely different depending on what the space feels like and what people in the space are responding to. A guiding principle of the White Noise Factory is that people listen in different ways and people need different things in order to listen. And some people need something sharp digging into them to kind of focus their attention, or some people need something soft to wrap around them. Some people need to be moving repetitively. Some people need to be absolutely still. Even if that isn't what you're normally comfortable with, so you can be among people without having to face them. I am someone who sometimes doesn't have language as a means of communication because I lose my capacity for it as part of my disability. But I think even when I am capable of language, I experience non-linguistic ways of being together as being less full of barriers. I want to bring audiences to this who are disabled people like myself, disabled people like Lucy, who I've worked with, disabled people like other members of the creative team, who all have different lived experience. But I also want to bring people who might not think of themselves as disabled in as audience members, because they might discover something about themselves, their own sensory need, their own ways of listening.
Hello. So that's a lot of words, which is my access adjustment for us as intellectual beings to legitimize now spending some time privileging our own sensory meaning making over our intellectual meaning making. So, I think there's 10 minutes, and I'm going to, on the screen, show at double speed some footage from a listening party that I did with Opera House staff in Germany a while back. And that's while we have our own mini listening party here and at home for those of you who are on the live stream. That footage is going to play some sounds from another listening session that took place in a specialist school last year. Will play, and those are sounds made by us and our collaborators and remixed by Sayang, the DJ on the project. Those will play. The lights will kind of dim and be kind of colorful and different, and that is to support us to overcome all the social barriers and the barriers of this formal presentation context as much as we can. So the main thing for you to keep in mind is that there is nothing for you to understand in the white noise factory, not now and not in the future. The invitation is for you to be here and be yourself in whatever way works for you. You're invited to use the space and the things here in whatever way you want to in order to listen. So for live stream people, I'm going to kind of send you away for 2 minutes. You've got 2 minutes to get yourself some material of some kind, so maybe paper, a roll of foil, some dried leaves, straws. Just quickly gather some stuff around you that is just everyday stuff. Okay, go. For those of us who are in the room, I've brought some listening devices. There's a couple of chairs here, and there are these beings. There are 2 beings. They are attached to each other. Perhaps it's one being. Each has a speaker as part of their body, and they provide an intimate sound experience and a bit of haptic sound. I suggest that 2 people who came together come and sit here and let its arm wrap around you and hold onto them, and you can also lean on them. Something to say is that it doesn't matter if anything breaks. Does not matter. Broken is fine. There are some objects that are kind of formed a bit like bracelets, and also the materials are there in their raw form, and you are welcome to take any of them in any way and do whatever you want with them. There's some paper tablecloths, which I find interesting as blankets. The dotted white LX lines on the floor depict where you are and are not in shot for the live stream, so that can be your decision, whether you want to come and explore your sensory meaning making here or over here or up on the banks, if you want to lie down on a seat, if you want to run across up and down the hall, all of that is fine. Okay. The only thing that we ask is that you do not communicate with language while the sounds are playing. This is to honor our collaborators, and it's also to support you so that we can free ourselves from the tyranny of language. So, having said all that, and honoring that this is a very formal setting and it might take a bit of time, there's 10 minutes. Come and explore something. Indirect attention is welcome, as well as direct attention. Being bored is welcome. just remember there's nothing to understand. And use what's available to you in whatever way makes sense for you for listening for 10 minutes. Okay. Hit the lights. Thank you.
Amazing.
For that.
Thank you so much. That was a really fabulous experience. I'm sure. Does anybody have any questions about that? No one. There's a few. I'll go. Carl, I'll go to you first.
By what process were the various objects selected? Did you walk around? Are they found art? Are they designed?
Thanks. Somewhere, both and neither, or so it relates to how the sounds were made. The objects that are here, the everyday stuff that we've had in the room, is here because it's kind of everyday stuff. And in particular, it has all come from the sessions we've done with young people and the stuff we used in those sessions. And that is, though the material we chose for that has come from partly just me thinking of everyday kind of overlooked materials, I guess, potentially overlooked. And also materials that are of relevance and of interest to the young people we've met. The straws are there for that very particular reason, for example. And then other things like this very thin plastic sheeting, we've kind of selected. It has a relationship to bubble wrap, which features a lot with the young people that we've worked with. But where the designer, Sasha Gilmore, and I sort of discovered this when we were in Germany, and it's a kind of highly portable material that makes a big impact. And in particular, it's been selected because you can make very little movement and it moves. So some of the people we work with maybe have very little autonomous movement, but we want to create a responsive environment that will respond to any amount of, like, even breath. This sheeting, if you even breathe on it, it moves. So yeah, it's everyday materials. There's a relationship that maybe I can't articulate yet, but I've done my best.
Fabulous, thanks. So there's another question up here. Let me.
Thanks so much for that. That was. I noticed doing that. I felt a sort of distinction between listening to sounds and making sounds, and I just wondered. But it's kind of related. I wondered what if you see a distinction there, or is it they're joined up, or what, in your experience and how you listen and see how this evolves with the various people doing it.
Yeah, I think that there is a tension between am I listening or am I doing, and for myself as someone who moves through the world with relative ease, I think it's on me to try and channel my listening and deprioritize my own doing. But for like a few people I can think of who we've made sound and music with, the making of sound is intrinsically linked. It's intrinsically part of the capacity to listen and respond. So that's part of why I'm making available in the listening environment things that make sound. But it is a question for me when we're mostly kind of dominant neurotype, shall we say, people in the room, or how the nuance there around how much we just start doing and maybe forget to listen. It's a tension that I'm exploring, yeah. Actually, I have a question, which is like, how did people feel about whether all this stuff facilitated them to listen or whether it was a distraction and what they might have needed to avoid being distracted, if that's the case?
It's fun to make noise with all the things there, so that is, I guess, distracting from it, but then you also listen to the sounds you're making and then also other people are making as well, so a bit of both, I guess. You know.
There is a duet going on, yeah.
Does anyone else have a thought on that? Yeah.
So thank you so much. It was really lovely. Yeah, and I appreciated, being able to participate a little bit and also given permission to experience things in a different way rather than just sitting and looking forward and passively consuming. So it very much worked for me. My question was about the tyranny of language and how you think. I think you're quite right, but I'm curious how you think about that.
Can you ask me more specifically?
Sure. What is it about language, or is there something? Yeah. What is it about not trying to understand through language that language sort of prevents us from doing?
I think that we kid ourselves about its efficiency. So as I've been working more with people who don't have language as a primary means of communication, and also additionally reflecting on communication challenges that I experience, I believe it's tricky because there are some very real ways in which we need language in order to enact autonomy over our lives. We really, really need that. And for people who don't have it, that's a really, really serious problem. But I think that that language is not the most efficient means of communication. And in some instances, or many, facility with language gives us or we take permission from that facility with language to try and understand less or something. We presume that there is understanding when we are communicating with one another with language. And I think most of the time there is not understanding. There is a lot of miscommunication, and it would be healthy if we knew that and then looked for other ways of being with each other. Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rhiannon. That's absolutely brilliant presentation. Super interesting. A round of applause, please, for lovely stuff. Amazing. So we are going to take a short break, I guess about 15 minutes, and then we'll be back with our final presentation. So please do have a go on the instruments and maybe make some more noise. And yeah, talk to each other. Everyone here is interesting and doing cool stuff, so get to know each other. Brilliant. We'll see you in 15 minutes.
Yep.
Lovely stuff. Hi, folks. Welcome back to the second half of the show this evening. So I'm really pleased to introduce Simon East, who is going to talk about, he's a creative technologist, who's going to talk about flowfal and creating music using gestures and movement. Simon.
Thank you very much. So my name is Simon East. For the audio description, I'm pronouns he, him, white male in his late 50s, wearing a very brightly patterned shirt and some shorts because it's hot here in London. So I'm going to talk about this technology called flowfal, and I'll quickly go through what the tech does, but it's really interesting watching Rhiannon's process there, and I think that's a very analog version, and this is the very digital version of this, but we are perhaps trying to do very similar things here. So what this is doing, can we show the, yes, okay, so this is sending movement data from phones or from watches or from these little magic digital ones, I'll show you in a minute, into this sequencer program, which is Ableton, which any of you may or may not know, but this is a very widely used sequencer program, and you can do all sorts of magical sound things in it. So I'll just give you a demonstration of the kind of things that we can do with it. So I'm going to start this particular bit of the program, and I'll show you what happens when I move. So that's taking movement information and triggering the sound. So for those of you who speak Ableton, and it's interesting actually underneath the hood here, this is actually written in Max MSP, the same language that Lee was talking about earlier on, but there's a nice UI over the top of it, so you don't have to deal with fiddly little boxes. So with this, this box here, this is great. I can point to the big screen here. You can see as I move, this display here is showing what the movement data is. And in this case, this is measuring acceleration, so those kind of things, but also any kind of rotation. So essentially, any kind of movement at all is going to trigger this sound. There's a whole lot of MIDI coming in here. This arpeggio sound, and when I move this, it triggers that, it lets those notes through. That is going into this thing here, which is a synthesizer. But as well as that, I can also use these kind of movements here to change these two parameters in the synthesizer. So this one in particular is the cutoff frequency, so you can hear this. It makes that whip, roll, roll. This one is changing another parameter, wavetable position, but that means you can get lots of nice sounds to it. So what is interesting about this is that very quickly when you give this to somebody, even non-musical, it doesn't take long before they start to play it. They understand how it works, what makes a nice sound. You can also hear that it's moving from side to side, speaker to speaker. So these things have got a compass in as well. And so we can do spatial sound with this. So here we've only got two speakers, so really it's only just going from side to side. I'm struggling a little bit in here because there's a lot of metal in this building, and so that messes up the compasses a little bit in these things, especially these old devices. But basically, if you have surround sound, and I often do things with 4 speakers and even more speakers, then the sound, you can move the sound around you, and it makes a very amazing immersive experience. So what I'm going to do is give some of these out to you so you can play, because it's one of those things that it's much better to actually experience it than hear me talking about it. So this one here is some nice singing bowls. So I'm going to give this to somebody. So if you can just, yes. So just hand that around the audience. And then this one is a little bell tree. If I start that on this side, have a play with that. I kind of feel now Rhiannon's got you all out into the body of the display. If anybody wants to come and play around with it and interact, and I don't have the groovy lighting. She set up. So whilst people are triggering those, I'll sort of go through a little bit about what we use it for. So there's a sort of 3 sort of usage modes for this, which are sort of interesting, I think. So the first thing to say about this technology is I didn't really think about this when I started using it, I should explain a little bit more about what these are, okay? So, and whenever I move it, it's going to trigger something as well. These are actual very old digital watches. I've just 3D printed a case around them. So I can give these out to audience members like yourselves. Very easy to pass around, virtually indestructible. But we also use these Samsung digital watches. It will actually work on Apple ones as well. So this is all standard technology. There's nothing special about this in any way at all. You can use your old mobile phones as well. So it's just taking all of the sensor data from these devices, sending it into this Ableton program, and inside Ableton you can decide what you're going to trigger, and essentially there's no limit to what you can do with that. So the only other bit of tech that's on here that's sort of odd is this. This is just a little Wi-Fi router. So I've just created a little Wi-Fi network here so that it's not trying to compete with anything else that's in the room. There are systems that use Bluetooth. Quite a few sort of systems that use that kind of stuff. It's fine at home, fine in the studio, but it really, you're going to have problems on stage with Bluetooth, because even with the number of you that are in this room now, you've all got Bluetooth switched on your phones. That's checking out a whole load of Bluetooth interference. It really can mess up with Bluetooth-enabled devices. So this is designed to be robust enough to really work on stage. I'm happy to go on stage and perform with it. In fact, loads of people are performing with it now. Making it 100% reliable on stage is kind of important. Obviously, I don't want anyone to suddenly have things dropping out. So the use cases really are sort of these 3 things. So first thing is dance, which is a very obvious thing. So if you give this to a dancer, they'll immediately put it on their ankle, is the first thing they'll do. They'll put it on their heads. They might even put it on their wrists. But they just love it because rather than dancing to the music, they are the music. So when they stop moving, the music stops. And that creates an extra level of tension and with the audience listening, because they're like waiting then for them to start moving again. So I literally have to grasp it off these dancers when I give it to them, because it totally changes the way they view things. And I've worked for a long time with a couple of choreographers making pieces that use this, which is sort of really good fun. The second thing is installations. So something I've done for like the last 10 years really is installations where people come in, I give them devices like this, and there might be music, there might be these weird sounds they're triggering, and what happens normally is people will come in and play with the sounds for a little bit, get used to what they're doing, and then actually quite a similar process will happen to what happened with Rhiannon's piece there, which is that people start in sort of twos, doing little dance pieces, doing little choreographies, doing little kind of theatre performances. And people come out of that really buzzing because they've created a lot of art. And maybe people who haven't created art for a long time. So one of the things I'm after specifically is getting people to return to a 10-year-old self where they're quite happy to play. You know, play is the sort of primary mode here. And you get lots of smiles on people's faces. People will start off, you know, not really wanting to move, and then after about 2 minutes, they're whizzing around, you know, triggering sounds. So that's a great thing to see, and it's you know, a really nice way of producing the interactive work. The third thing is musicians. So I've now got several musicians using this live. So the idea is, rather than people twiddling knobs on stage, they're using their hands, often with these things attached with those watches, to control bits of the synthesizer, control effects on their voice. So that is something which is sort of really now beginning to take off as I get more and more artists interested in that. And just makes the whole thing about electronic music a little bit more performative, a little bit more interesting to watch than just somebody pressing some buttons on stage and hiding behind a bank of technology. So there is also some visual side to this as well. So this Ableton thing here will also export OSC. So we're going to get, back just a little bit of technology here for those who are interested. So with this one, number 5, as I move here, this is sending out the roll, the yaw, and the pitch information, and that's sending that out on OSC, which is just a way of sending data between programs. And then I've got running in the background here a visuals program called Touch Designer. So if I open that up, and I better now do it on this one. Yes, okay, so now you'll see that, I need to turn the brightness up on this really, but I can now control that visual just by moving it. So I'm going to give that out to people just to mess around with. Now, this could be controlling the sound at the same time as well, or you can have it separate. I quite like to keep them separate because people get transfixed by the visuals, and then they stop moving. They just stand there and get transfixed by the visuals. So this is just another thing that you can do with this. I've had people controlling lights, these sort of lights, moving them around. Anything that speaks OSC, you could control with this stuff. So I think that's probably all the explanation that I need to do. So are there any questions?
Actually, I have a question.
Yes.
Could you kind of explain Flowfile as a project? How can people, is it open source? How do people engage with this? How do they get to use it?
All you need a version of Ableton that has the Max for Live technology built into it. So that is the standard version with the Max for Live upgrade or the suite version. If you download the trial, the 30-day trial, that has Max for Live built into it, and you can try it out. Everything else is freely downloadable. So essentially, you download apps onto your phone or onto these watches, the Flowfile app, and you download a set of plugins that you just drag and drop into Ableton. And there's a whole load of videos and tutorials on my website to show how that works. But flowfile.com is the website. So it's all basically free to use. It's pay as you feel kind of stuff. So it is accessible to anyone. And I should sort of talk about the accessibility of this. I suppose that it's kind of accessible by default, really. If you have ability to move in some way, then you can attach one of these devices to you with a running pouch, or put it in a pocket, or or attach it to a wheelchair. So as long as you can move in some way, then you can trigger the sound. You can change the sensitivity on all of these devices to make them super sensitive or not very sensitive at all. So it's open to pretty much everyone in terms of triggering stuff. But also the tech is very accessible in that it runs on very, very old phones. It runs on these watches. Some of these now are second-hand ones are about 45 quid on eBay. So the tech is also very affordable.
Brilliant, thanks. Any other questions? Sorry, I didn't saw you there.
Oh yeah, I was just wondering, well, if I've got this right, it's a lot of what I just saw, it was kind of like CC messages it's sending out. But I was wondering, is it possible to kind of, say, control a scale if you were to turn around using the compass or something? Could you, like, make a scale kind of play, discrete notes? So, yeah, what's happening is, let's switch it back to the Ableton view. So internally, it's using its own, things are mapped using just mapping inside Ableton. So within Ableton, I can, for example, if I wanted to change the way that this particular thing here was mapped. So let's use channel 2. Yes, here we go. That worked well. Okay, so currently you can see this yaw thing here, which is that motion there, is moving that panning of that thing. We can unmap that, and then I could map it to be, I could change it to be the roll of that one, for example, and I might map that again to just the panning, just because it's easy to show you. So now that's going to control the panning. So it's really easy to remap stuff inside Ableton. This is sort of what it does well. It's sort of its thing that it does, because you can have all sorts of controllers mapped to all sorts of things inside Ableton. So it's very good at doing that. So that's the primary way you can control it. If you want to send out, so there's a whole load of things in here which will send out MIDI data. I've shown you the OSC as well, so you can communicate to external things. But you can also, with some of these plugins here, get it to generate notes or sets of notes, depending on which way you move the device. So there's all sorts of ways you can trigger things with this, either with acceleration inputs or with the positioning inputs. So yeah, there's a whole load of ways of doing it.
Brilliant. There's another question over here from Carl. Let me bring the mic over.
And maybe this was obvious visually, but can you, so if one of these parameters is accelerating, it seems to be some threshold gets sent across. Does that threshold all set in the Ableton plugin? You can say when you go past this amount, trigger it, or like how much of that reconfigurability is there?
Yes, so that's exactly how it works, and everything is controlled inside Ableton. So there's nothing that's being controlled on the phone or on the watch, because you want to change that parameter sometimes depending on which patch you're running. So I'm switching here between this gongs one and this arpeggio one, and I probably have different settings for each of those different input channels. So you can change the threshold, you can change how sensitive it is. So for example, this gongs one, I can now change this to be really super sensitive. So I'm going to change the scaling to be like that. So now, even this kind of movement here, this tiny movement, is triggering it. If I turn that right the way down, then I'm going to have to really go for it. So this is a trick that Rebecca, my choreographer collaborator, often does. She gets me to turn the sensitivity right the way down on these watches. So she really has to reach for the dance moves in order to trigger the sound. So you've got everything controlled from here. So the idea is that it's really simple
to change these parameters, and you can change them on the fly as well.
And is that a little GUI or that's?
Yeah, it's just a little. So it's a very standard Ableton user interface methods.
Okay.
I don't know how accessible those are in terms of readers and things. I'm hoping that they.
Yeah,
I know that they added a lot of accessibility in the last release. That was a huge amount of work they did in version 12. So I would hope that that is more accessible as a sequencer. Sequencers are very, very complicated programs. I think they probably are quite hard to make accessible, but I think...
I imagine it takes an hour to find that little button.
Yes, it possibly does. It is a very crowded user interface, but you can definitely simplify that a lot. There's a lot going on here because this is my demo patch, but you could definitely simplify it a bit, I think.
Cool. I can just tell somebody to configure it for me.
There's another question here, Ross.
Hello.
Hi.
The devices that you're using are transmitting all of the data that you would need to do sensor merging to get absolute orientation.
Yes.
And is that something that you have interested in or have played with?
In terms of your positioning in the room or positioning in the...
Absolute orientation, like...
Yeah. Yeah, so you get that just by default from these watches. They have fuser sensing anyway.
Yeah.
So that allows you to have those kind of movements there where you're controlling something using the roll. I'm actually sending the whole quaternion data for anybody who's interested in the maths of it.
Yeah.
So it's 4D stuff. Look up quaternions and you have your mind sort of blown. It takes a little while to get your head around them, but and I won't go into the reason why, but there's a very good reasons why you need to deal with 4 dimensions
Gimbal
in
lock.
terms of doing this. Yeah, gimbal lock. Go and ask this guy here. So it's hard to work out how things are being rotated in 3D space, and you have to do things in 4D in order to handle that. So there's a bit of maths going on in the background there, but it allows you to extract that absolute orientation, and that's really useful for when you're doing spatial stuff. So really advanced spatial systems that are not only spatial this way, but also in height. So they've got speakers all the way around you. Using the elevation, I can move the sound completely around you in a full sort of half dome, if you like, around you. And with a full-on spatial sound system, that is pretty impressive. Sounds really good.
Fabulous. I've got one more question over here. Let me just head over this way.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm looking to explore a lot more within this area, but I don't have a lot of programming, or I'm not great at math, and I don't have programming knowledge. I'm guessing there is, essentially we can call it input and output. So in terms of input devices, what are universal / other common devices that we might be able to use besides?
So the first thing I suggest to everyone is they just, in your drawers at home, you'll have an old mobile phone that you forgot to, that you were going to eBay and you forgot to get around to doing it. And it's been sat in that drawer for years. So an iPhone 6S or an Android Galaxy 5, those will work fine with this. So you can use those old phones, strap them to your body, move them around in your hand, and you can have obviously multiple of those. So that's what I would always suggest people do start with before they start buying watches and stuff. So there's no programming required. You do need to get your head around Ableton a bit. There's lots and lots of tutorials online about that. But it is, it's a pretty simple set of plugins really in terms of what it can do. Certainly in its simplest modes. There's more advanced things you can do if you want to. But what Ableton gives you is the ability to use, samplers and granular samplers and plugins that make these wonderful sounds. So you can very quickly produce something that sounds kind of pretty amazing. So that's the thing you sort of need to learn, but you don't need to learn any programming languages. There's no Max MSP to learn here. That's all under the hood.
It's essentially figuring out the interface.
Yes, it's really the interface and how to use, but once you've learned how to use Ableton, essentially you've learned how to use this. This works in the same way as any other set of Ableton plugins that you might ever use. It's designed to look like the built-in ones.
Thank you.
So you just download Ableton onto your phone?
So Ableton's running on the Mac.
That's running on your computer?
Yes.
So how do you then connect the device? Sorry, that's a really obvious question, but I'm a bit confused.
No, it's a good question. So let me explain it by showing you on here. So if you think of it, these they're all the same as it being on your phone. So I've downloaded the FlowFile app here. If I start that up, if I was connected to the right Wi-Fi, which I was, so I'm going to connect to the Wi-Fi that's connected to my PC, and if I now start up FlowFile, it will come up with a set of controls that are set up for this particular thing. So this app is available for Android and for Apple, and works for Android smartwatches and Apple smartwatches as well. And that's the bit you download, and this is just sending the movement data, basically. So sending all of the data I'm doing right now, it's sending here. All of the sound is produced in here, in Ableton, and the data is sent over Wi-Fi to this thing here, and it comes into here. You don't have to worry about how it connects up. It just finds the server and connects automatically to it. So it handles all of that for you. There's a thing here. I'll show you the plugin. It's called FlowFile Master. This is the thing that just lives somewhere in the Ableton project, and this is the thing it's actually talking to. That sets up what these channels are called, and it tells you what watches are connected and how much battery they've got and things like that. So, yeah, that's where the sound's being produced. This is where the complicated stuff happens. And if you don't, so you sort of need a sound person to understand this. There is a version of this that I'm developing where all of this will be on your phone. So you'll not have any of this. You won't have the surround sound. You won't have the multi-user capabilities of it, but as a single person experiencing, you'll be able to produce movement-generated songs or soundscapes on your own phone. So that's sort of where it's going.
Fabulous. Are there any other questions in the room? We do have one more. Quick one. There you go.
You mentioned that the compass wouldn't work very well in this setting. Is that because of this particular building, or would a regular house, or would that work better? Would it only work outside, I'm assuming?
I think it's these old phones, actually. So these old smartwatches are not as good. These Samsungs are much better. So these sometimes get confused. They just sort of stop working for reasons that nobody really ever was able to explain to me. So there's a whole load of backup stuff in terms of it goes back to various other backup sensors and so on. So it's to do more with the tech on these ones than anything else, I think.
Okay.
So you would need to be in a very, very modern steel frame building before you'd get a huge amount of problems, I think. But you might, that's always going to be a problem, unfortunately, if there's a ton of steel around. But yeah, there's compass on here, basically three-axis compass in these things, which is measuring the Earth's magnetic field, so it knows exactly where you're pointing at any one time.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much. I mean, there's so much depth in this tech, isn't there? But also, I really do like the connection between the playfulness of it when you're just using it is really clear, isn't it? And it does have a large connection with what Rhiannon was.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can think of it as an instrument. I think of it as an instrument, really. So it's interesting when I give it to other musicians, other artists, they go off and do amazing things with it, and things that you've never thought of doing, and that's where it becomes really interesting, I think.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Round of applause, please, for Simon.
Thank you.
Amazing stuff. So that's the end of our end of our presentations here. Thanks everyone for coming, everybody for coming online. Just a few things before we go. I'd like to give a huge thank you to the City Bridge Foundation and to the Arts Council for funding this project, DMLab. We are going to be announcing a grand expansion of DMLab very soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. That's going to be very exciting. Many people in the room here are involved in that, so that's something to look forward to. Please, can we give a huge round of applause to our amazing BSL interpreters, Laura and Mel. Yet again, we've thrown them fearsome levels of technical language for them to deal with, and so they always do an absolutely amazing job, so thanks so much. And also, Heather, our captioner, who does a similarly fantastic job online doing the captions. Also, the team here, Kieran doing the audio tech at the back. This is a really complicated event because we're doing streaming from all different places and we're going out, so it's really hard to set up. So thanks, Kieran, and also Rob, Deborah, and Gio in particular for wrangling the tech and making the whole event run smoothly. Please give. And of course, Hugh here, who also helps with everything and does a lot of instrument development, and yeah, absolutely brilliant. So thanks everyone for coming. The next one is on the 28th of July. That is where we will be announcing, opening our next round of accessible instrument development funding. So if you're interested in that, if you've got an instrument that you need some funding for, we have some seed funding pots for £1,000 for people who are looking to develop new instruments. So please come along to that if you're interested in that. We'll be getting presentations from the people who got the funding last year. They'll be showing what they're doing. We're going to be talking about what's necessary for that. So please do come along to that. It should be a really good one. And thanks again, everyone, for coming. And we will see you hopefully next time. Oh, I forgot the most important thing. Please fill in the evaluation survey, because then our funders are happy and we know what we're doing well and we know what we're doing badly and we can make everything better. So please do follow that QR code, fill in the evaluation survey. Thank you.